A poor baby is abandoned on the doorstep of an elderly couple. Years later, the man falls into a coma, and what the doctor reveals about the girl makes the woman faint. Emily was born in a small rural community in the heart of Arkansas, surrounded by vast wheat fields and dirt roads. From an early age, life proved to be challenging for her and her family. Her father, a sturdy man with calloused hands, worked as a tenant farmer, while her mother devoted herself to the home, cooking, washing clothes by hand, and taking care of Emily and her two younger brothers. Despite their constant efforts, the money barely stretched to cover the family's basic needs. When Emily turned 15, her desire to change her life became stronger than ever. That year's harvest had been disastrous, and her father spent weeks trying to renegotiate debts with the landowner. The desperation was evident in her mother's eyes, who could barely hide her tears as she counted coins to buy flour. Emily knew that if she stayed, she would be just another mouth to feed, another obstacle to her family's recovery. It was then she made the decision that would alter her life forever. Before continuing, make sure to subscribe to the channel so we can reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. "I'm going to the city," she announced one evening as the family ate dinner in silence. Her father looked at her in disbelief, and her mother dropped her fork, stunned. "And what do you think you'll find there? Riches? Happiness?" her father asked in a grave tone, but Emily stood firm. "I don't know, Dad, but I know I need to try." After much debate and many tears, her parents reluctantly agreed. A distant aunt living in Detroit had arranged for Emily to work at a sewing factory and offered her a small place to stay in her home. With a worn-out backpack and a bundle of clothes her mother had stitched for her, Emily left before dawn, bidding her younger brothers a long, heartfelt goodbye. The bus ride to Detroit was grueling. Emily had never left the countryside before, and the endless highways and constant hum of the engine were almost overwhelming. When she finally arrived in the city, she felt immediately out of place. The skyscrapers she had imagined from books and stories seemed even more imposing in real life, but the acrid smell of smoke and the constant blaring of horns quickly brought her back to reality. Detroit was anything but welcoming. Her aunt's home was in a working-class neighborhood, with narrow streets and rows of houses that seemed weary from the passage of time. The next day, Emily started her job at the sewing factory. The environment was stifling, filled with dozens of noisy machines and the exhausted faces of women who barely lifted their eyes as they worked. Emily found herself among them, her fingers roughened by the steady handling of threads and fabrics. Though the work was exhausting, Emily found small moments of hope. On a Sunday morning, sitting by the window in the room she shared with two cousins, she looked out at the city and made a promise to herself. Somehow, she would make it. The city wasn't exactly as she had dreamed, but she was determined to fight for a better future. After a few weeks at the sewing factory, Emily began to adapt to the grueling routine. The work was tough, but she learned quickly and gradually earned the trust of her supervisor. One crisp autumn afternoon, as the women packed up the stitched fabrics, a young delivery man walked through the door, carrying boxes of supplies. He was tall, with disheveled brown hair and tired eyes, but there was something about his demeanor that caught Emily's attention. Liam was a delivery driver for the factory, responsible for transporting the materials the seamstresses used daily. At just 20 years old, his expression carried the weight of someone who had already faced many battles. During a lunch break, Clara, Emily's new friend, struck up a conversation with him, and naturally, Emily ended up joining in. "You're new around here, aren't you?" Liam asked, taking a sip of coffee from a paper cup. Emily nodded, trying to hide her nervousness. "I just arrived from Arkansas," she replied. He smiled, a curious glint in his eyes. "I'm from rural Kentucky. We don't really choose, do we? We just end up here, trying for something better." The two began seeing each other more often, as Liam made regular deliveries. He always found a way to exchange a few words with Emily, asking about her work or sharing stories from his childhood in the countryside. Soon, their conversations grew more personal. Liam confided that he had lost his parents at a young age and had been working since he was 14 to support himself and his younger sister, who lived with an aunt. One day, after a long chat at the end of her shift, Liam invited Emily to grab a hot chocolate at a nearby diner. Emily hesitated but eventually accepted. That night, amidst laughter and tales of interrupted dreams, a special connection began to form. Each found something in the other that they couldn't quite explain. A sense of relief, a feeling of belonging that they had never experienced before. As the weeks passed, Liam and Emily started meeting whenever they could. He would walk her to her aunt's house after work, and gradually, their time together became indispensable for both of them. Despite the hardships they faced, they felt that together, they could endure anything. Liam, despite his difficult life, always found ways to make Emily smile. He brought small surprises. An antique brooch he'd found at a flea market or a bunch of wildflowers he'd picked on his way to work. One afternoon, while they were strolling through a park weathered by time, Liam worked up the courage to take Emily's hand. She hesitated for a moment, but when their fingers intertwined, she felt a calmness she hadn't known in years. Under the thin, bare branches of the trees that braved the cold, they both realized just how much they meant to each other. Their relationship wasn't easy. The factory work and their financial struggles were constant obstacles. Liam continued his delivery job, and Emily, though exhausted, always worked overtime to save money. Yet, amidst the gray days, they found moments of happiness. On Sundays, they wandered through city markets or sat on random staircases, sharing dreams of a better future. After a year of dating, Liam decided it was time to take the next step. He knew he didn't have much to offer, but he wanted Emily to be his partner for life. On a cold winter night, he took her to a high point in the city, where the shimmering lights of streets and buildings stretched out below them. With trembling hands, partly from nerves, partly from the cold, Liam pulled a simple but meaningful ring from his pocket, bought with the few dollars he had managed to save. "I know I have nothing but dreams and promises," Liam said, his voice trembling. "But I want you to know that wherever I go, I want you by my side. Will you marry me?" Emily felt tears streaming down her face as she nodded. "I don't need anything but you, Liam. Wherever you are is where I want to be." A few weeks later, they were married in a small ceremony at the neighborhood church. Only a handful of factory co-workers and Emily's aunt attended. Without money for celebrations or a honeymoon, they spent their first night as husband and wife in the small basement apartment they had rented in an old building. It was simple, with a cramped bedroom and damp walls. But for them, it was the beginning of a shared dream. The apartment itself was tiny, with walls stained from humidity and a persistent smell of mildew that no cleaning product could erase. The only window was at sidewalk level, allowing a little light to filter in during the day. At night, however, the space was plunged into an almost stifling darkness. To Liam, it was a temporary place, a stepping stone. To Emily, it was an achievement, modest as it was. She poured herself into making the space feel more like home. One day, she found a rocking chair left on the curb. After cleaning it up and patching it with a piece of floral fabric, she transformed it into her favorite spot to rest and daydream. Though the apartment was cold in winter and stifling in summer, their evenings were filled with the sound of conversations and laughter. After long days at work, they sat together at the small kitchen table, sharing simple meals and planning for a future where life might be easier. One evening, Emily discovered she was pregnant. Their son, Jake, was born on a spring morning after hours of labor. Exhausted but overwhelmed with indescribable happiness, Emily held the baby in her arms for the first time as Liam, his eyes filled with tears, whispered words of gratitude and wonder. "He's perfect, Emily. Look at him. He's everything I've ever dreamed of," he said, gently stroking their son's tiny face. Jake's arrival transformed the young couple's lives. Their already challenging routine became even more demanding. The baby's cries filled the small basement apartment, and Emily, despite her inexperience, showed an unwavering determination to care for her son. She spent sleepless nights cradling him in her arms or feeding him, while Liam did everything he could to lighten her burden. Liam would spend hours after work sitting in the rocking chair, holding Jake in his arms and singing old songs he had learned from his mother. For Emily, watching that scene was a moment of peace, a reminder that even amid hardship, the family they were building was the greatest treasure they could ever have. As Jake grew older, the demands of motherhood became even more intense for Emily. He was no longer a newborn and had begun exploring the small apartment with curiosity, getting into everything within reach. Emily felt she always had to be close by to protect him, keeping him away from the damp walls or stopping him from putting dangerous objects in his mouth. The decision to stop working, though difficult, became inevitable. Liam, recognizing the necessity, didn't hesitate to take on more responsibilities. He secured a second job, working as an assistant in a mechanic shop during the day and making deliveries at night. His routine became grueling, but he knew it was the only way to provide for his family. "I can handle it, Emily. For you and Jake. I'd do this 1,000 times over," he'd say, trying to hide the exhaustion that was slowly taking its toll on him. The new dynamic brought challenges. Liam left before the sun rose and often returned long after Jake was asleep. Emily did her best to keep the household running smoothly, juggling her responsibilities while ensuring Jake felt cared for and loved. Even during the toughest times, Emily and Liam found ways to support one another. There were days when Liam came home so tired that he could barely speak, but a single look exchanged between them said it all. "We're in this together, and that's all that matters." Jake, with his boundless energy and laughter, was the ray of sunshine that brightened their cloudy days. Years of hard work eventually began to pay off. After 5 years of relentless effort, Liam earned a promotion at the mechanic shop, becoming the owner's right-hand man. The promotion brought a significant increase in his salary and allowed him to quit his second job as a delivery driver. Meanwhile, Emily began taking on small sewing jobs from home, contributing to the family's finances while still being able to care for Jake. With their finances more balanced and a small amount of savings, the couple decided it was time to look for a new place to live. Emily found an ad for an apartment in a quieter neighborhood, with 2 bedrooms and large windows that let in plenty of sunlight. Visiting the property was a special moment for the family. Jake, now almost 6 years old, ran excitedly through the empty space, while Emily envisioned how to decorate each corner. When they moved in, the joy was immense. The new apartment felt like a different world compared to their old one. The walls were clean and free of damp stains. The living room was bright and spacious, and there was even a small terrace where Emily could grow some plants. Jake was especially thrilled with the room that would now be all his own. "It's bigger than me," he exclaimed, laughing as he sprawled on the floor. Emily spent weeks transforming the space into a true home. The move also brought a new routine. With more space and a better location, Jake began playing with neighborhood kids, and Emily finally had time for herself, enjoying quiet afternoons reading or sewing without the constant rush. Liam, now with a more stable schedule, could have dinner at home with his family, something that had been a rare luxury in previous years. Though hard work was still a part of their lives, the new home represented an incredible achievement. It was a symbol of their perseverance and the promise of better days ahead. A few months after moving into their new apartment, Emily began noticing something different. She felt mild dizziness upon waking and, at times, a fatigue that didn't feel normal. A visit to the doctor revealed unexpected news. She was pregnant again. Liam was silent for a few moments when he heard the news. His eyes filled with emotion, and a wide smile spread across his face. "We managed to raise Jake even when we had nothing, Emily. Imagine now, this child is already coming into a home full of love." Emily cried, not out of worry, but joy. They had overcome so many challenges together, and this new life felt like a divine gift. In the early days of a golden autumn, Sarah was born, a healthy, lively baby girl. From the very first moment, Emily and Liam felt Sarah brought something special to their home. Unlike Jake, who had always been a calm baby, Sarah was energetic, with curious eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. Jake, now 7 years old, was enchanted by his little sister. He would often sit by her crib and talk to her, even though Sarah was too young to understand. "You're going to be my adventure partner, you know?" he'd say as Sarah babbled in response. Sarah grew up surrounded by her family's love, but as the years passed, something began to emerge in her personality that worried Emily. Unlike Jake, who had always been grateful for what he had, Sarah started showing dissatisfaction with what life had provided them. This became more evident when she started school and began comparing herself to her classmates. Emily noticed Sarah's behavior during pickups after school. Sarah frequently talked about her friends' big houses, describing in detail the luxurious decorations she saw at birthday parties. "Mom, why don't we have a new sofa like Lucy's? Ours is so old and ugly," she said one day, crossing her arms. Emily tried to explain that love and togetherness were more important than material things, but Sarah didn't seem convinced. Toys also became a source of frustration for Sarah. She would spend hours staring through store windows when they walked through the city center, longing for the fancy dolls that Emily couldn't afford to buy. At home, Sarah often complained about the hand-me-down clothes she received from neighbors. "I want pretty clothes like Ashley's. Why do I always have to wear other people's leftovers?" Jake, now a teenager, noticed his sister's behavior and tried to talk to her. He had a straightforward yet caring way of addressing her concerns. "Sarah, that's not what matters," he said one day after hearing her grumble about a second-hand bike she had received. "Look at us. We have parents who do everything for us. You should be grateful." But Sarah only rolled her eyes and responded dismissively, "That's easy for you to say. You don't know what it's like to be the only one who never has anything new." Emily, meanwhile, felt hurt every time she heard her daughter's complaints. She knew Sarah was still too young to understand the sacrifices their family had made, but that didn't make the words any less painful. One night, after putting Sarah to bed, Emily confided in Liam. "I feel like we're failing her, Liam. She doesn't see how hard we work to give her the best we can." Liam held her, trying to comfort her. "She'll understand one day, Emily. We just have to keep showing her what truly matters." Despite the difficult moments, Emily and Liam never stopped loving Sarah deeply. They believed that, in time, she would mature and learn to appreciate what she had. Until then, they knew they would face many emotional challenges. One Saturday afternoon, Jake was repairing the old bike he had used for years, while Sarah sat on the doorstep with her arms crossed. She had refused to go out and play with the neighborhood kids, claiming her clothes weren't nice enough. "Why are you always complaining, Sarah?" Jake asked without looking up from the bike. "Don't you know how hard Mom and Dad work to give us what we have?" "You don't understand, Jake," Sarah replied sulkily. "The other girls have new clothes, pretty toys, big houses. And all I have is this." She gestured toward their modest yard, with its simple fence and the plants Emily carefully tended. Jake sighed and stood up, facing his sister. "Do you think I don't see what other people have? Do you think I don't want better things too? Of course I do. But you know what? I look at what we do have, and I'm happy because I know how much our parents fought for it. They gave everything for us, Sarah. Everything. And all you do is complain." Emily had always been a strong woman, accustomed to overcoming hardships without complaint. Yet hearing Sarah's constant grievances made her question her efforts as a mother. Every comment about the lack of new toys or nice clothes felt like a small needle piercing her heart. Sarah's 15th birthday was a day filled with mixed emotions for the family. Emily and Liam worked hard to make it special, despite their limited resources. Jake helped organize a simple lunch with Sarah's favorite dish and a small cake decorated with sugar flowers made by hand. Everyone tried to create a joyful atmosphere, but Sarah, while polite in thanking them, seemed distant. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Sarah sat at the small desk in the room she shared with Jake. The dim light of the lamp reflected on her face as she wrote a letter with trembling hands. She hesitated, but the dissatisfaction consuming her spoke louder. Mom and Dad will understand one day, she thought, trying to convince herself that her decision was justified. At dawn, Emily found Sarah's room empty. The bed was neatly made, but there was a carefully folded letter resting on the pillow. With her heart racing, Emily opened the paper and began to read. Mom and Dad, I love you, but I can't stay here anymore. I'm tired of living like this, always seeing other people have everything while we always have so little. I don't want to spend my whole life struggling like you. I want a different life. A life where I can have everything I dream of. I can't do that if I stay here. Emily's hands trembled as she clutched the letter, tears streaming down her face as Liam appeared in the doorway, alarmed by her expression. She handed him the letter, unable to speak, as the weight of Sarah's words crashed down on them both. I'm leaving to marry someone who can give me the life of my dreams. You've always said that love is everything, but I don't believe that anymore. Love doesn't pay the bills or buy nice clothes. I hope one day you'll understand that I had to do this for myself. Please don't try to find me, Sarah. Emily could barely finish reading. Her hands trembled, and heavy tears streamed down her face. Liam, seeing his wife so distraught, gently took the letter from her trembling hands and read it in silence, his expression growing darker with each passing word. She's gone, Liam. Our daughter is gone, Emily whispered, before breaking into deep, heart-wrenching sobs. Liam tried to stay strong, but the weight of guilt crushed his heart. He blamed himself for not giving Sarah everything she wanted, for failing to help her see the value of what they had. Jake, upon hearing what had happened, was in shock. Why would she do this? How can she think we're holding her back? He asked, but no one had answers. In the days that followed, the family searched everywhere for Sarah. They went to her school, spoke with friends and neighbors, and even sought help from the police, but it seemed as though she had vanished. The pain of not knowing where she was or whether she was safe became a constant presence in their home. Emily spent sleepless nights praying for her daughter and imagining what her life might be like. The days after Sarah's departure felt like an unending nightmare for Emily and Liam. The letter their daughter had left behind offered no clues as to where she might have gone. It only deepened the emptiness and anguish in their hearts. Emily, who had endured so many hardships in her life, felt that no pain compared to the uncertainty of not knowing where her daughter was. At first, they focused their search on the surrounding area. Liam walked the neighborhood streets, going into shops, diners, and even bus stations, clutching a recent photo of Sarah. Emily visited the school, hoping one of her classmates might know something, but no one had any useful information. She used to talk about wanting to leave, but I never thought she'd actually do it, one classmate said with a shrug. When they realized their personal efforts weren't enough, they turned to the police. Sitting on a bench at the station, Emily clasped her hands tightly together, as if holding them could somehow contain the despair within her. The officer who helped them was kind, but his words brought no comfort. Teenagers run away from home all the time. Most of the time, they come back after a while. We'll file the case and keep an eye out, but unfortunately, there's not much we can do if she left voluntarily. Emily left the station feeling utterly alone in the search for her daughter. Back in their neighborhood, the couple began asking their neighbors for help. Many people showed solidarity, offering to post flyers with Sarah's photo and speak to their own networks. Jake, though so young, did everything he could to help. He and Liam spent hours walking the nearby streets, asking in markets, bakeries, and convenience stores if anyone had seen Sarah. The response was always the same. No one knew anything. The family's hope began to waver, but they pressed on, driven by the love that refused to let them give up. The days stretched into weeks, and the ache of Sarah's absence lingered, a shadow over their home. The days turned into weeks, and the hope of finding Sarah began to blend with the cruel reality that she might not want to be found. Emily, unable to bear the thought, spent her nights sitting on the terrace, gazing at the stars and praying for her daughter's safety. "Where are you, Sarah? Why did you leave us like this?" she whispered to the wind, as if it could carry her words to her daughter. Liam, on the other hand, dealt with his pain in his own way. He spent more time working, as if staying busy could suppress the guilt and longing that consumed him. However, at night, when everything was silent, he couldn't stop the tears from falling. Jake, though trying to stay strong for his parents, also felt the weight of Sarah's absence. He wondered if he could have done something differently, if he could have helped his sister see the value in the life they had. "She'll come back, Mom. I'm sure of it," he said once, trying to comfort Emily, even though he wasn't entirely confident in his own words. As the years passed, Jake grew up carrying the values his parents had always instilled in him: hard work, gratitude, and love for family. He continued studying while helping at home as much as he could. After finishing high school, he landed a job as an administrative assistant at a local company. It was a simple job, but Jake saw it as the first step towards something bigger. Liam and Emily were proud of their son. Despite all the challenges they had faced, Jake had always shown determination and responsibility. He saved most of his salary and, over time, managed to enroll in a technical accounting course. His hard work paid off, and shortly after graduating, he secured a better position at an accounting firm, marking an important milestone in his life. It was during this time that Jake met Amanda, a young teacher with a warm smile and a gentle demeanor. They met at a community event organized by mutual friends and felt an immediate connection. Amanda admired Jake's maturity and the deep respect he showed for his family. Jake, in turn, was captivated by Amanda's passion for teaching and her optimistic view of the world. After 2 years of dating, Jake decided it was time to take the next step. On a quiet evening, while they were walking in a park near her house, he knelt down and, with trembling hands, proposed. Amanda, surprised and emotional, accepted without hesitation. The wedding was simple but filled with love, attended by close friends and, of course, Emily and Liam, who couldn't hold back their tears as they watched their son build his own family. It was a bittersweet moment, one of pride and joy, but also a reminder of Sarah's absence, an ache they carried quietly in their hearts. A few months after the wedding, Jake and Amanda rented a small apartment in the city. Though excited to begin this new chapter, Jake felt a pang in his heart as he left his parents' home. He knew that Liam and Emily would feel his absence even more deeply due to the void left by Sarah. "I'll never be too far away," he promised Emily before leaving. "You can always count on me." Amanda, kind and understanding, made a point of keeping Jake close to his parents. On weekends, the couple often visited Liam and Emily for dinners and long conversations in the living room. Though Sarah's absence still lingered over the family, the presence of Jake and Amanda brought comfort and a sense of continuity. The house was completely quiet that evening. Emily sat on the sofa, stitching a patch onto Liam's shirt, while Liam, now in his 60s, read an old book with his glasses perched on the tip of his nose. Although the quiet moments were welcome, the void left by Sarah's absence still hovered over their home. Even with Jake's frequent visits, there was a space in their hearts that seemed impossible to fill. The sound of the doorbell shattered the silence. Emily and Liam exchanged confused looks. It was late, and unexpected visits were rare. Liam walked to the door calmly, but when he opened it, he froze, stunned. On the doorstep, wrapped in a white blanket, was a baby. "Emily, come here," Liam called, his voice trembling. She rushed to his side, and when she saw the child, her hands flew to her mouth in shock. It was a baby girl, with big, bright eyes and fine hair that seemed to shimmer in the moonlight. The little one looked at them curiously, not crying, as if she instinctively knew she was safe. Emily immediately picked up the baby, feeling the warmth of the tiny body against her own. "Who would do this?" she asked, glancing around. Liam stepped outside, calling out and searching for any sign of who might have left the child. But he found nothing except the distant sound of the wind. There was no note, no clue about who she was or where she had come from. Back inside, Emily placed the baby on the kitchen table and began examining the blanket for any hints. Liam, still stunned, sat down in a chair, running his hands through his graying hair. "What are we going to do?" he asked, more to himself than to Emily. Emily's response came without hesitation. "We'll take care of her." Her eyes shone with a determination Liam knew well. It was the same look she had when they struggled to give Jake and Sarah a decent life. But, Emily, what if someone comes back for her? What if she has a family out there looking for her? And what if she doesn't? Emily countered, holding the baby's tiny hand. "Liam, we can't just hand her over to the police or an orphanage. Not now, not without knowing what happened." Her words hung in the air, and Liam looked at his wife, recognizing the strength and compassion that had carried their family through so many trials. He nodded slowly, knowing deep down that Emily was right. That night was long and filled with discussions. Liam knew that Emily had already made up her mind, but deep down, he too felt something different when he looked at the child. It was as if the universe had given them a new chance, a way to fill the emptiness they had been carrying. As the baby slept in an improvised crib made of cushions and blankets, Liam sat next to Emily. "If we're going to do this, we need to do it the right way. I'll talk to Jake tomorrow. He might help us register the baby." Emily smiled, her eyes brimming with tears. "Thank you, Liam." The next morning, Liam called Jake. Hearing his son's calm and attentive voice brought instant comfort to the couple. "Something important has happened, Jake. We need you to come home," Liam said, trying to hide the emotion in his voice. Jake noticed the unusual tone and promised to be there in a few hours. When Jake arrived, he found his parents sitting on the couch, with the baby carefully wrapped in a blanket in Emily's arms. The sight left him intrigued. "Who is she?" he asked, looking at the tiny, fragile baby. Emily explained the situation, recounting every detail of the previous night, while Liam filled in about his unsuccessful attempts to find out who might have left the child. Jake listened in silence, his expression serious. After a few moments, he sighed and said, "You know, the right thing to do would be to take this to the police. They can try to figure out where she came from and find her family. Otherwise, she'll likely be sent to an orphanage where she can be adopted legally." The suggestion, though reasonable, made Emily shudder. "Jake, do you think I can hand this baby over to an uncertain fate? She was left on our doorstep. Maybe it was an act of desperation, but I feel it's our responsibility to care for her now." Jake hesitated, looking at the baby as she started to cry softly. He knew his mother had an enormous heart and that once she made a decision, it was almost impossible to convince her otherwise. Liam, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. "Jake, your mom is right. We feel that we're meant to take care of her. But we need your help." Jake furrowed his brow. "What exactly are you asking for?" Emily took a deep breath and explained the plan. Jake and Amanda would register the baby as their own to avoid any legal complications. "But she will be raised here, by us," Emily continued. "She'll be like a granddaughter to you, but she'll be safe with us." At first, Jake felt uneasy about the idea. It was a big request, and he knew it could lead to complications down the road. But as he looked at his mother's determined gaze and the pleading expression on Liam's face, something inside him softened. "If this is what you really want, I'll help," he said. "But we have to do this properly. Amanda and I will register the baby. But you have to promise that if the police or any other authority shows up, you'll cooperate." Liam and Emily nodded in agreement, their relief palpable. Jake, though still grappling with the weight of the decision, couldn't deny the deep love and commitment his parents had for this unexpected new chapter in their lives. Emily nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, my son. You have no idea how much this means to us." In the days that followed, Jake and Amanda went to the registry office to officially record the baby's information. The process was swift, and the little girl was named Grace, a choice made by Emily, who believed the name symbolized the unexpected gift they had received. Meanwhile, Emily and Liam prepared their home to accommodate Grace, rekindling the joy of caring for a child. Grace brought a new light to Emily and Liam's home. The energetic and sweet baby transformed the atmosphere, filling it with laughter and unforgettable moments. Emily fully devoted herself to caring for Grace, waking up early to prepare her bottles, sewing tiny clothes, and watching each new milestone with delight. Liam, though more reserved, spent countless hours rocking Grace in his arms, softly singing lullabies he had learned when Jake and Sarah were little. Jake and Amanda continued to support Emily and Liam, visiting often and bringing whatever Grace might need, from toys to medicines. However, a few months later, Jake received an unexpected job offer. His hard work as an accountant had caught the attention of his superiors, and he was offered the opportunity to lead an international project in Brazil. The offer was extraordinary, but it also came with a dilemma. Jake shared the news during a family dinner at his parents' house. "I don't know how to say this, but I've been offered a job in Brazil. It's a 2-year contract. Amanda and I need to decide soon whether we'll accept it or not." Emily remained silent for a moment, processing her son's words. "2 years?" she asked, trying to hide her unease. Jake nodded. "It's a huge opportunity, Mom. Something that could change our lives. But I know Grace is still so young, and I worry about leaving you with this responsibility." Liam placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. "You have to do what's best for your family, son. We're here. Taking care of Grace isn't a burden. It's a blessing." Amanda added her support. "Jake, your mom and dad are right. Grace is in good hands. They love her as if she were their own. I think we can take this opportunity knowing she'll be safe and happy here." Although the decision was difficult, Jake and Amanda ultimately agreed to accept the job. In the weeks leading up to their departure, Jake spent as much time as possible with Grace, holding her in his arms and speaking to her in a soft tone. "When I come back, you'll be so grown up I might not even recognize you," he would say as she smiled back at him, blissfully unaware of the changes ahead. The day of their departure was filled with emotion. Jake hugged his parents tightly, promising to stay in regular contact and visit whenever possible. "Thank you for everything you're doing for Grace," he said, his eyes brimming with tears. Emily held their adoptive granddaughter in her arms and replied, "She's our family, Jake. She always will be. Go and do what you need to do. We'll take care of her." As Jake and Amanda left for their new chapter abroad, Emily and Liam stood on the porch, holding Grace close, knowing their love and commitment to her would guide them through the days to come. With Jake and Amanda's departure, Emily and Liam adjusted their routines, now fully dedicated to Grace. Though they missed Jake deeply, they found solace in the little girl, who continued to bring light and purpose to their lives. The household revolved around Grace. Emily loved preparing homemade baby food, carefully selecting fresh fruits from the local market, while Liam often came home with small gifts for their adopted granddaughter, such as picture books or stuffed animals. On weekends, the three would go to the park, where Grace enjoyed chasing birds and playing on the swings under the watchful eyes of her protective grandparents. As the years passed, Grace began to develop a charming personality. She was curious and kind, always eager to help, even with small tasks like putting away her toys or bringing Liam the newspaper. Emily often watched her playing in the yard and reflected on how this little soul had transformed their lives. "Can you believe how lost we were before she came into our lives?" Emily asked Liam one evening as Grace slept peacefully. "It feels like she gave us a new purpose." Liam smiled and replied, "I believe it, Emily. Every time I look at her, I see that she's exactly what we needed. Maybe she was sent to us for a reason." With Grace growing up surrounded by love and devotion, Emily and Liam's home blossomed once again. The void left by Sarah still lingered, but it had become a distant shadow. Grace filled their days with light, reminding them that even in the darkest moments, life could bring beautiful and unexpected surprises. However, despite the joy Grace brought, Liam carried a burden that time had failed to ease: Sarah's absence. He blamed himself every day, believing he hadn't been a good enough father, that his lack of resources or understanding had driven his daughter away. Every time he looked at Grace, though he felt immense love, his thoughts often wandered to what might have been if Sarah were still there. At first, Liam kept his suffering hidden. He maintained a cheerful demeanor for Emily and Grace, helping in every way he could. But at night, after everyone else was asleep, the pain became unbearable. One evening, as he passed a bar on his way home, Liam decided to step inside, thinking that a drink might quiet the storm in his heart. Initially, it was an occasional escape, a glass of whiskey to clear his head and try to forget what he couldn't change. But the habit grew more frequent. Each time thoughts of Sarah tormented him, Liam found refuge at the bar. There, no one asked questions, and he could drown his frustrations in silence. Emily began to notice subtle changes in Liam's behavior. He started coming home later, with a faint smell of alcohol and tired eyes. At first, she said nothing, but her concern grew. "Liam, are you okay?" she asked one morning as he sat at the table, sipping his coffee with his head bowed. He simply nodded, avoiding her gaze. Though Emily didn't press him further, the unease settled in her heart, and she began to wonder what was weighing so heavily on her husband's mind. Over time, the situation worsened. Liam began missing family commitments and spending more time away from home. Emily, already suspicious, decided to follow him one night. When she saw him sitting alone at the bar, a glass in hand and his head bowed, her heart broke. She waited for him to return home and confronted him. "Liam, what's happening to you? Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice trembling with concern. Liam finally broke down, letting the tears flow. "I can't, Emily. I can't stop thinking about Sarah. I can't stop feeling like I failed her. Every time I look at Grace, I'm reminded of everything I've lost. I know I'm wrong, but it's the only thing that makes the pain go away, even if just for a little while." Emily embraced him, feeling his pain as if it were her own. "Liam, we both miss her, but Grace needs you. I need you. We can't change what happened, but we can be better for her. You don't have to carry this guilt alone." The conversation helped, but it wasn't enough to fix everything. Liam continued battling his demons, alternating between good days and bad ones. Emily, determined to help him, started staying closer to him, encouraging him to spend more time with Grace and to open up about his feelings. As the months passed, Liam's health began to show warning signs. He was constantly tired, complained of abdominal pain, and was visibly losing weight. Emily urged him to see a doctor, but Liam, ever stubborn, dismissed it as mere fatigue or a passing ailment. One afternoon, while helping Emily organize some tools in the garage, Liam suddenly felt a severe dizziness and lost his balance. Emily rushed to him, but before she could catch him, he collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Panicked, she screamed for help and called emergency services. The minutes until the ambulance arrived felt like an eternity, and all Emily could do was hold Liam's hand and pray that he would be okay. At the hospital, after a series of tests, the doctor called Emily in for a discussion. "Mrs. Emily, your husband's condition is serious. His liver is severely compromised, likely due to years of excessive alcohol consumption compounded by his age. He'll need a transplant as soon as possible, or the situation may become irreversible." The doctor's words hit Emily like a punch. She knew Liam had been battling his inner struggles, but she hadn't realized how severe the consequences were. "What about a donor?" she asked, barely holding back tears. The doctor explained that the best option would be to find a donor within the family, as this would increase the chances of compatibility. Emily nodded, trying to process the information, even as the weight of the news bore down on her. She knew the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but she was determined to do whatever it took to save Liam. That night, while Liam was still sedated, Emily called Jake. Even though he lived far away, he listened with concern and urgency. "I'll be there tomorrow, Mom. We'll do whatever it takes," he said, trying to reassure her. Grace, now 8 years old, sensed the tension in the air and asked in her sweet voice, "Is Grandpa going to be okay?" "Grandma?" Emily hugged her tightly, trying to stay composed. "He's sick, my dear, but we're going to do everything we can to help him." When the test results came back, the family's anxiety only grew. Emily, who had taken the test hoping to be a match for Liam, was told she wasn't compatible. The doctor, with a compassionate expression, explained that they would look for alternatives, but time was of the essence. Grace, always observant, noticed the somber mood at home. Though she couldn't fully grasp the severity of the situation, she understood that her grandfather needed help. One morning, as Emily prepared breakfast, Grace appeared in the kitchen and said, "Grandma, can I take the test too? Maybe I can help Grandpa." Emily stopped what she was doing and looked at her granddaughter, feeling the weight of her words. Grace was so young, so innocent, yet she already showed a generous and loving heart. But Emily knew the truth. Grace was adopted and couldn't biologically match Liam. "My sweet girl, don't worry about that," Emily said, caressing Grace's cheek. "You help Grandpa every day with your joy and love. We'll find another solution." Grace insisted. "But Grandma, what if I can help? I want to try." Emily gently redirected her, asking her to go play while she finished making breakfast. The day dawned with a mix of anxiety and hope. Jake, who had arrived the night before, went with Emily to the hospital to take the compatibility test. During the drive, mother and son spoke little, both weighed down by the uncertainty of what the results might mean for Liam's future. Grace stayed home with a neighbor under the promise that they would return soon to pick her up. Hours later, the doctor called Emily and Jake into the waiting room. Unfortunately, Jake's test also came back negative. "We'll need to continue searching for a donor," he said gravely. The words hit Emily like a ton of bricks, and she felt the world around her blur. Jake held his mother's arm, trying to comfort her. As they were preparing to leave, the doctor asked them to wait. "Before you go, I need to share something." Grace insisted on taking the test, and we decided to include her sample, even knowing the chances were slim. Emily immediately interrupted. "But she's not," her voice faltered, and she looked at Jake as if seeking permission to continue. "Grace is adopted. There's no way she could be compatible." The doctor paused, his expression calm but firm. "I understand, Mrs. Emily. However, the results show that Grace is a match." Emily froze, her breath caught in her throat, and Jake's eyes widened in disbelief. The room seemed to fall silent as the implications of the doctor's words sank in. The doctor looked at both of them, clearly puzzled. "This doesn't make sense. The results show that Grace is biologically compatible with Mr. Liam. Not only that, but the genetic markers indicate she is, in fact, your biological granddaughter." For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Emily's eyes widened, while Jake stared at the doctor, speechless. "Are you sure about this?" Jake asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "I am. The results are definitive. There's no margin for error," the doctor replied, handing over the papers that confirmed the results. The weight of the revelation was overwhelming for Emily. Hearing the doctor confirm that Grace was indeed her biological granddaughter sent her into shock, and the room began to spin. Jake managed to catch her before she fell, but his mother fainted in his arms. When Emily opened her eyes, she was lying in a hospital bed with Jake by her side, holding her hand. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, his voice thick with worry. Emily blinked a few times, trying to piece together what had happened. Then the doctor's words came rushing back to her like a lightning bolt. She sat up abruptly, ignoring the dizziness. "Jake, Grace is Sarah's daughter," she said, her voice trembling. Jake nodded, looking down at the floor. But why would she do this? Why would she leave Grace with us and disappear from our lives? The doctor entered the room, checking to make sure Emily was stable. I know this is a lot to process, but it's important to focus on the next step. The surgery. Grace is a match, and if you agree, we can begin the process as soon as possible. Emily nodded slowly, still absorbing the flood of emotions and revelations. Of course, we'll do whatever it takes to save Liam, she replied without hesitation. The surgery was scheduled for the following week. Emily stayed by Grace's side throughout the preparatory process, explaining everything in simple terms. You have something very special inside you, Grace, and it's going to help Grandpa get strong again, she said, holding the little girl's hand. Grace, in her innocent way, replied, I want him to play with me on the swings again, Grandma. I'll help Grandpa get better. At the hospital, the medical team treated Grace with extraordinary care, impressed by her bravery. During the procedure, Emily and Jake waited anxiously in the waiting room, their thoughts torn between Liam's health and the shocking discovery about Sarah. After what felt like an eternity, the doctor finally appeared, his expression calm and reassuring. The surgery was a success. Both of them are recovering well. Relief washed over them instantly. Emily let out a deep sigh, while Jake placed a firm hand on her shoulder. We did it, Mom. He's going to be okay. In the days that followed, both Liam and Grace began to regain their strength. Grace, though a little tired at first, quickly returned to being the cheerful child who brought light to their home. Liam, on the other hand, seemed more grateful than ever. This little girl saved my life, he said, holding Grace in his arms with tears streaming down his face. I'll never be able to thank her enough. Emily watched the scene with a heart full of gratitude and wonder, knowing that the bond between them had deepened in ways none of them could have anticipated. Grace had not only healed Liam's body, but had also brought hope and a renewed sense of purpose to their family. With Liam's health stabilized, Jake felt it was time to address the mystery surrounding Sarah. During a family dinner, he brought up the subject. Mom, Dad, I've been thinking, we need to find out what happened to Sarah. There are too many unanswered questions, and it's keeping us stuck in the past. Liam looked at Emily, seeking her approval. Do you think she wants to be found, Jake? Maybe Sarah has chosen to move on with her life. Emily responded before Jake could. She left Grace with us, Liam. That means she still cares. Something must have happened for her to disappear like that. We need to find the truth. Jake had already formulated a plan. He would hire a private investigator to assist with the search. We have to start from scratch. Talk to former neighbors, co-workers, anyone who knew Sarah before she left. Emily agreed, though the idea of revisiting those painful days filled her with a mix of hope and fear. Grace, who had been busy drawing at the table, lifted her head and asked innocently, Are we going to find my mommy? Emily scooped her up into her arms and said softly, We're going to try, my love. We'll do our best. After weeks of anxious waiting, the investigator hired by Jake finally got in touch. The call brought a mix of nervousness and relief to the family. I found something, he said, an address in another city where Sarah lived a few years ago. We don't know if she's still there, but it's a place to start. Jake immediately made arrangements for the trip, insisting that both Emily and Liam come along. If we find any clues, I want you there to hear the truth with me, he explained. Grace stayed in Amanda's care, with a promise to keep her entertained while they pursued the investigation. The address was in a modest neighborhood with small, neatly lined houses. As they arrived, Emily's heart raced. Everything felt so distant and yet so close. Jake knocked on the door, and a young, thin woman answered. At the mention of Sarah's name, her brow furrowed, but recognition soon dawned. Oh, Sarah. Yes, we lived together for a while, the woman, introducing herself as Denise, said. That was a few years ago. She was going through a tough time. Emily could barely contain her emotions. Do you know where she went? Is she okay? Why did she leave us? Denise invited them inside and began sharing what she knew. Sarah came here after meeting a man. He was charming, wealthy, and promised her the world. They were together for a while and she seemed happy. But when she found out she was pregnant, everything changed. He told her he didn't want kids and wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility. It was cruel. He told her to figure things out on her own. Emily covered her mouth in disbelief, her eyes filling with tears. Liam sat quietly, his fists clenched. Jake leaned forward, his voice steady but strained. What happened after that? Did she ever talk about us? Denise hesitated before continuing, her tone soft. She was devastated. She didn't have anywhere to go or anyone to turn to. She mentioned her family, but she felt ashamed and scared. She was worried you'd never forgive her for the choices she'd made. Emily's heart broke further with each word. We never stopped loving her, she whispered. Why didn't she just come back to us? Denise sighed. I think she wanted to, but she felt trapped. When Grace was born, it was like a light in her life, but she was overwhelmed. One day, she just packed up and said she was going to give Grace a better life. She didn't tell me where she went, only that she hoped Grace would be safe and loved. The room fell silent as Emily, Liam, and Jake processed Denise's words. While it provided some clarity, it also left a deeper ache. They had answers but still no sign of Sarah. Emily clung to the faint hope that finding this thread might lead them closer to their daughter. Emily felt the tears streaming down her face as Liam stared silently at the floor. Denise continued, she was heartbroken. I tried to help as much as I could, but neither of us had much money. When Grace was born, Sarah became completely lost. One day, she told me she had to leave the baby somewhere she knew she'd be cared for. And that's what she did. Jake clenched his fists, trying to process the information. And after that, do you know where she went? Denise shook her head. She left for another state. She said she needed to start over, but I never heard from her again. I'm sorry, but that's all I know. Emily thanked her, her voice trembling with emotion. Knowing that Sarah had faced all of this alone broke her heart, but it also sparked a new hope. If she cared enough to make sure Grace was safe, it means she still loves us, she said, looking at Liam and Jake. Jake promised to continue the search, now with a clearer direction. They said goodbye to Denise, determined to follow every lead until they found Sarah and finally understood what had happened. After the conversation with Denise, Jake intensified his efforts to locate Sarah. The detective was instructed to widen the search, checking records in neighboring states and pursuing new leads. Days turned into weeks, but the family's determination remained unwavering. Emily, though anxious, felt they were closer than ever to finding her daughter. One morning, as Emily and Liam were having breakfast, the phone rang. Emily answered, and the detective's voice immediately sparked an emotional response. I found Sarah. She's living in a modest neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio. I have the address and some details about her situation. Emily could barely respond before breaking into tears. Liam rushed to her side, taking the phone to hear the details. Is she okay? He asked, his voice heavy with concern. The detective hesitated. She's alive, but it seems she's going through a tough time. I recommend you speak with her in person to understand more. Jake was informed shortly after and arranged for the trip that same day. The drive was filled with a mix of anticipation and fear. Emily, sitting in the passenger seat, held an old photo of Sarah, remembering her daughter as she was before leaving. Do you think she'll even recognize us? Do you think she forgives us for all of this? She asked, more to herself than anyone else. Liam, behind the wheel, tried to reassure her. What matters is that we're going to see her, Emily. The rest we'll figure out when we get there. When they arrived at the address the detective had provided, they found a modest house worn down by time. The windows were partially covered with old curtains, and the small front yard appeared neglected. Emily's heart raced. This is it, she whispered as Jake parked the car. For a moment, they all sat in silence, each one grappling with their own thoughts. Emily finally took a deep breath and opened the car door, ready to take the first step toward reuniting with Sarah. Before they stepped out, Liam held Emily's hand. Whatever her reaction is, we're here to help. We're not losing anything anymore. Emily, just trying to reclaim what's ours. Emily nodded, wiping her eyes before stepping out of the car. Jake was the first to knock on the door. The sound echoed through the quiet house, and for a few seconds, nothing happened. Just as they were about to knock again, the door slowly creaked open, revealing Sarah. Her face bore the marks of time and struggle, but her eyes still carried the same intensity as before. She stood in the doorway, stunned, as if she were seeing a ghost. "Mom? Dad? Jake?" she murmured, unable to believe what she was seeing. Emily stepped forward, tears streaming uncontrollably. "It's you, Sarah. We found you." The house was modest, with peeling walls and old furniture, clear signs of years of hardship. Emily glanced around, her heart tightening. The scene reminded her of her own home in the early years of her marriage, before they had built everything they had. Sarah sat on the edge of a worn armchair, her eyes still red from tears. "I don't know where to start," she said, staring at the floor, unable to meet their gaze. Liam moved closer and sat beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Start with what you feel, Sarah. We just want to understand." Sarah took a deep breath, hesitating before beginning. "After I left, I thought I'd find happiness. I wanted everything I thought I didn't have with you. I met that man and thought he was the solution to all my problems. But I was wrong." She began recounting the months after leaving her family. The wealthy man who had promised her a glamorous future abandoned her the moment he found out she was pregnant. He said he didn't want a child, that I should figure it out on my own. And I was so lost, so alone. I didn't know what to do. Emily fought to hold back her tears, listening intently with a heavy heart. When Grace was born, I realized I couldn't give her the life she deserved. I had nothing, no support. The only thing I knew was that if she stayed with me, she wouldn't have a future. That's when I decided to leave her on your doorstep. It was the only place I knew she'd be safe. Liam tried to remain calm, but his hands trembled. "You could have come back, Sarah. We would have helped you." Sarah shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't have the courage. I said so many awful things before I left. I thought you'd never forgive me. And after that, my life fell apart even more. I started working in bars to survive, and each day felt harder than the last. I started drinking to try to forget, but I never could." Her voice broke as she shared the painful truth. Emily leaned forward, reaching for Sarah's hand. "We never stopped loving you, Sarah. Never. No matter what you said, you've always been our daughter." Jake, standing nearby, added softly, "And Grace. She's a part of you. You gave her to us because you wanted her to be safe. That shows how much you love her." Sarah finally lifted her eyes, meeting her family's gaze for the first time. The weight of her guilt and sorrow was evident, but so was a glimmer of hope, as if she were beginning to believe that forgiveness and a new beginning might still be possible. Emily stood up and knelt in front of her daughter, holding her hands tightly. "Sarah, it doesn't matter what happened. It doesn't matter what you said or did. You are my daughter, and I will never stop loving you. You're not alone anymore." Jake, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. "We're going to help you, Sarah. You went through all of this alone, but now you have us." Sarah cried even harder, as if every word from them was a balm soothing her wounds. For the first time in years, she felt seen, accepted, and loved. Still trying to process her parents' presence, Sarah watched them with a mixture of gratitude and shame. When Emily finally sat beside her, she took Sarah's hands in hers and looked deeply into her eyes. "My daughter, I never stopped thinking about you. Every night, I prayed that you were safe. And now that you're here, all that matters is that we're together again." Sarah began to sob, and Emily hugged her tightly. "Don't be afraid, Sarah. It doesn't matter what happened. It doesn't matter what choices you made. We're here to help you start over." Emily suggested bringing Grace to visit Sarah. "She needs to meet her mother," Emily said gently. "And you need to feel her love, Sarah. It's stronger than you can imagine." When Grace arrived, holding Emily's hand, she was initially shy upon seeing Sarah. Emily knelt beside the little girl and said softly, "Grace, this is your mommy." Sarah could barely hold back her tears. She knelt down to be at Grace's eye level and extended her hand. "Hi, my love. I'm your mom." Grace looked at her curiously, but with a sweet smile that reflected her innocence. "You're my real mommy?" she asked softly. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I am, my angel. And I'm so sorry for not being with you all this time. But I love you. I've always loved you." Grace hesitated for a moment, then took a step forward and hugged Sarah. "I love you too, Mommy," she said in her gentle voice. Sarah held her daughter tightly, as if afraid she might disappear again. It was a moment of healing for both of them, a bridge that connected the years of separation with a bond of renewed love. Later, Sarah gathered everyone in the small living room of her house. "I need to say something," she began, her voice trembling with nerves. "I know I've caused so much pain for all of you. I was selfish and immature, and I let my shame keep me away from you. But above all, I want to ask for forgiveness. For leaving, for abandoning Grace, and for hurting you. I just want to be worthy of the love you still have for me." Emily was the first to speak. "Sarah, we don't need apologies. We just need you here with us. The past is the past. Let's focus on the future." Liam nodded in agreement, his eyes glistening with emotion. "You're part of our family, Sarah. You always will be. And what matters is that you're back." Tears filled the room as the family embraced, their bonds stronger than ever. It was a new beginning, a chance to rebuild what had been broken and to face the future together. Jake, though more reserved, also stepped closer to his sister. "I won't say it was easy, Sarah, but seeing everything you've been through, I can't feel anything but pride that you survived and found your way back. We're here for you." Sarah began crying again, but this time her tears weren't of pain. They were of relief and gratitude. She promised herself she would do everything in her power to rebuild her bonds with her family and, most importantly, to be the mother Grace deserved. Grace, in her innocent way, quickly accepted Sarah into her life. "Can you teach me how to draw?" she asked one day, holding a notebook. Sarah smiled and sat beside her daughter. "I'm not very good at it, but we can learn together." Moments like this became frequent, and each shared laugh was a step toward a stronger relationship. With her family's support, Sarah began to seek stability. Emily and Liam encouraged her to find work, something that would help her rebuild her independence. Jake, using his connections, secured an opportunity for her at a local office, where Sarah started as a receptionist. Though the job was simple, it meant the world to her. "It's a start," Sarah said proudly as she shared the news with her family. "And I promise I'll do my best." Shortly after starting her job, Sarah managed to rent a small house next to Emily and Liam's. The close proximity allowed her to stay near her family while building her new routine. Grace was overjoyed, happily running back and forth between the two houses, filling them with her stories and laughter. On weekends, Sarah made it a point to cook for the family. Though her culinary skills were far from Emily's, the meals were filled with love and laughter. "Is it too salty?" Sarah would ask, and Liam, with a smile, would reply, "It's perfect because you made it." Sarah's gratitude for a second chance was evident in everything she did. She often expressed her love for her family, whether by helping Emily with chores, playing with Grace, or simply sitting with Liam to talk about their day. The years passed, and Grace grew up surrounded by love, discipline, and dedication. From an early age, She displayed a sharp intelligence and a strong sense of justice that captivated her family. Emily and Liam, always supportive, nurtured her curiosity and helped cultivate her passion for learning. Sarah, on her part, spared no effort to ensure her daughter had opportunities she herself had never had. When the time came for Grace to go to college, the whole family rallied to support her. Jake, now thriving in his career, offered financial assistance, while Sarah and her parents provided emotional encouragement. "You're going to do amazing things, my love," Emily said on the day of her farewell, wiping away tears as Grace hugged everyone goodbye before leaving for Harvard. The moment was bittersweet, but it was a testament to the strength and resilience of their family. A family that had been broken but found its way back to each other, stronger than ever. Grace's journey was marked by challenges, but also by remarkable achievements. She studied tirelessly, determined to honor the sacrifices her family had made for her. During her college years, she kept in constant contact with Sarah and her grandparents, sharing her victories and seeking their advice. When she finally graduated from law school, the entire family traveled to attend the ceremony. Emily and Liam, now elderly, couldn't hold back their tears of pride as Grace walked across the stage to receive her diploma. Sarah, overwhelmed with emotion, held Emily's hand and said, "This is because of you. You gave her everything I couldn't." Emily smiled gently and replied, "We did this together, Sarah. You gave her the kind of love no one else could." After years of dedication, Grace became a respected judge, known for her empathy and impartiality. With her career firmly established, she decided it was time to give back to the family that had done so much for her. She purchased a house in a luxurious neighborhood and transformed it into the perfect home for Sarah and her grandparents. Emily and Liam, now in their advanced years, enjoyed a peaceful and comfortable life. Grace made a point to visit Sarah regularly, always bringing stories from work and fond memories from her childhood. Liam, who had quit drinking after his surgery, showed renewed health, dedicating himself to daily walks around the neighborhood and maintaining a healthy diet. One sunny afternoon, as Grace and Sarah prepared tea in the kitchen, Liam sat on the porch with Emily by his side. "I never thought I'd live to see a day like this," he said, watching the trees sway gently in the breeze. "After everything we've been through, here we are, together." Emily smiled, squeezing his hand. "It was all worth it, Liam. Every sacrifice, every hard moment. We're living the happy ending we always dreamed of." Their quiet moment on the porch was filled with gratitude, a testament to the strength of their love and the resilience of their family. Though the path had been long and fraught with hardship, it had led them here, to a place of peace, love, and the fulfillment of dreams once thought impossible. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like and a comment. Let me know which city you're watching this video from. A big hug, and see you in the next story.